everybody. So glad that you're joining us. I'm just logging on here a minute early because I am a board member and I want to get this right. You're logging into the Tegan and Sara Foundation Instagram Live. We're going to be having a wonderful conversation with an incredible grantee beyond these walls. We're just going to wait for them to join us in a minute or two. But as we wait for our my first guest here at the Tegan and Sara Foundation, our third live interview with a grantee, I just want to make sure that everything's going well. Please tell me if, give me any feedback along the way. I am good at feedback if anything goes wrong. It's great. We're gonna get this party started. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna invite in our special guest for the day, Biff Chaplow from Beyond These Walls. Biff, just give me a minute to find you here in our scrolling list of guests. It's very exciting to be able to find you. Here we go. Oh, that was perfect. Thank you, Biff. You're obviously a pro at the Instagram Live. So excited. Biff, welcome.
Hey. Hi.
Hi. Let me just turn up my volume here a little bit. Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. You look great. The color behind you was a beautiful choice. For those of you listening, Biff has, I would call it a mustard yellow.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Great. Okay, awesome. Biff, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, tell our audience and remind me what pronouns to use, and I'll tell everybody what we're going to do today.
Yeah. So I'm Biff Chaplow. I run Beyond These Walls, which is a organization that works to support incarcerated LGBTQ people. I use they, them pronouns. And we're based out of Portland, Oregon.
Yay, Portland, Oregon. I did spend some time there for a hot minute, and it was the best gluten-free pizza you'll ever have.
Undoubtedly.
Biff, my name is Jessica Halem. I use she and her pronouns. And I am excited to be a board member of the Tegan and Sara Foundation nonprofit. And I also wear another hat, which is I work at Harvard Medical School. And I am the first and pretty much only in the US LGBTQ outreach and engagement director for a medical school. So I have a passion for healthcare, but an even greater passion for supporting community nonprofits, community projects like yours that are doing incredible work like this. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
For those of you who are just joining in, we're going to talk to Biff a little bit about the work that they're doing. And I'm also going to ask Biff to help all of us, some of our viewers, this might be their first time learning about the issues of incarceration and the issues affecting LGBTQ people who are currently facing incarceration. I want to just start off at the top by saying there's a very heavy heart all of us have watching police violence once again rip our lives apart, rip Black people's lives apart. So I will ask you to help us understand this moment a little bit and how the prison system, the carceral system, what we can do out here to understand that better. This is a great moment for all of our viewers to learn more from you.
Totally.
Biff, tell us a little bit more how you guys got started, how y'all work, what you do, and maybe a little bit about what's happening right now, especially during COVID.
All right. So we got started, I want to say 9 years ago. And it was basically started because, the founder of Beyond These Walls was working for the task force, which is a national LGBTQ organization that works on policy. And, they would receive letters from incarcerated people, but there was nobody really to answer them. a lot of organizations actually have this issue where incarcerated people will send a letter and it just never gets answered because it's not really anybody's job to answer them. And so, we decided, well, let's start answering those letters. Like, let's round up the letters and figure out what is it that they are requesting or need, and let's just answer those letters. And, a like hard rule of incarceration work is if you answer, they will write. And so, because so few organizations will answer mail from incarcerated people. And so it just blew up, pretty much right away, where as soon as we started answering people, they would write back. They would tell their friends, like, oh, hey, these are people that you can count on that will answer your mail. And so it started that way. And it's, we started as a pen pal and holiday card project where we really focused on the idea of connecting community from people on the inside to people on the outside. And so we developed a value that we call community without conditions, where we think that every person is better than the worst thing that they ever did. Imagine if you or I were defined by the worst choice that we made, or maybe were allegedly made even. And so we decided that we wanted a queer community that didn't have all of those conditions, that lived up to its core value of welcoming and accepting people in, as they sit in their truth. And so we decided that we would move forward, and we decided to just expand, as we grew, we expanded programs. And so we went beyond pen pal stuff and holiday card stuff. And we started doing like case management, which is just essentially where we help connect people with the resources that they need. That's everything from legal help while they're in prison to reentry resources when they're being released. And eventually, a few years ago, we decided to start getting inside of prisons. So we felt like it wasn't really enough to just engage with people from the outside. That the thing that, people were asking of us was to come in and see them. They wanted to meet with us. They needed help inside. And a lot of abolitionist organizations would not do that. They would not believe in that. But we believe that the movement to end mass incarceration has to be led by the people most affected, which are incarcerated people. And it is not our job to tell them how to lead. It is their job to tell us what they need. And they told us, come inside to the prison, please. And so we have several groups inside prisons that we run. And I can talk more about those later, but in terms of the COVID stuff, we a lot of people might or may not know this, but because of COVID, prisons have shut down. Like, they've completely closed their doors. So if you're not essential personnel, you cannot come in. And that includes lawyers, that includes family members, and it includes us. So all of the groups and supports that we were doing for people inside prisons came to like a quick halt when Oregon prisons decided to close their doors. And I'm not criticizing that decision. It's just the reality of what it is. And so we decided that what we would do is we would find lots of other ways to connect with people. And one of the ways, the project for which you all gave us funding, was to start a COVID line, a COVID crisis line, where incarcerated people could call us, yes, like a phone, could call us and talk to us, get information, report information. And we would take that information and we would use it to negotiate with the Department of Corrections to help support the efforts of other organizations that are taking action, whether legal action or more policy-centered action. And so that is what we have been doing.
Wonderful. Well, we were, as you know, and for those who are tuning in, the Tegan and Sara Foundation, we give out a little bit of money. We're still pretty new as an LGBTQ foundation. And we give out a lot less than some bigger foundations, but one of the benefits to being new and small is that we could be nimble and quick. And so we tried to very quickly pivot when COVID struck to find a way to disperse money quickly, especially to those that might not be sort of formal 501c3s or big grantees of other places. And we really wanted to find those high impact or small dollars, but high impact and a hotline for folks inside of prisons was really exciting for us. Let me back up and ask you, Biff. So I noticed that you use people first language for people who are listening, where this might be their first time talking about prisons and people who are in prisons. What's important about how we talk about people who are incarcerated? Even just hearing all the messaging around us can be hard to move away from. Help us learn the terminology of speaking about these issues. Sure,
that's a really good question that most people don't ask. So I'm glad that you did. So, as with most social movements, most social justice movements, we don't want to use the language of the oppressor. So, and partially because it is dehumanizing language, and it is traumatic language for people that have been incarcerated or are incarcerated right now. And so we will not say things like inmate or felon or criminal, because those deduce a person to one identity rather than recognizing their experience. And so saying things like people who are incarcerated, people who live in prison, we also believe it's okay to say prisoners, because that speaks truth to what is happening, that people are unjustly locked up for long periods of time for, sometimes marijuana. The millions of people we still have incarcerated for marijuana, it's not justice. They're a prisoner. And so we try to focus on that language. If in doubt, in any social justice issue, people who blank is a really great way to say it. People who are experiencing homelessness, people who are incarcerated. Those are that's sort of the way to go. I loved that you talked about one of the things we really loved at the foundation was this piece that you guys that you all talk about: community without boundaries, community without boundaries. Right? Am I saying that? Community without boundaries. Community without conditions. Community without conditions. But yes. And I have to give a shout out for people looking to read something. One of my favorite books at the moment to have read recently is Conflict is Not Abuse by Sara Schulman. And I feel like Sara Schulman really talks a lot about this idea about what does it look like to build a queer community in which we are not replicating the carceral culture. And so I'm gonna, we could talk about that maybe another time, but help us understand what are some of the specific issues that transgender women are facing in Oregon and or in other areas of work that help our listeners learn about transgender women who are very important to us at the Tegan and Sara Foundation. What are they facing as prisoners? Yeah, so a huge part of our work is with transgender women. And the first group inside prison we have is a leadership academy for transgender women. And this is not just true for Oregon, this is across the country, but transgender women are often housed inappropriately. The group that we run is in a men's penitentiary. So they're all transgender women being housed in a men's supermax facility. And not fun, but fact for you is, less than 3% of incarcerated transgender people nationwide are housed in a facility that aligns with their gender identity. So let me just repeat that back. So transgender women are housed in men's prisons and transgender men are housed in women's prisons. Yes. And that, of course, everyone watching this can start to do the math of the violence and safety issues, dehumanizing conditions for someone to not be housed and to live in the prison that fits their gender. Right. And just to be clear, that's not always the answer, because the answer is really about taking people on a case-by-case basis, that people that are safer or feel safer in a certain prison. And that's we all present differently. There are trans women that might present very masculine. Right. And for them, sometimes they feel safer in a men's prison. But there are trans women in our group that nobody would mistake them for a man. Right. But that doesn't matter.
Right.
They're being
Right.
housed in a men's prison, you know, and just think of like, we have attractive trans women of all different varying identities, and there's no one size fits all solution for them.
So that's a wonderful takeaway. Yeah, that's a wonderful takeaway, Biff, right? There is not, so this isn't a policy, simple policy conversation. This is about really forcing a conversation about the safety of prisoners and what's best on a case basis. But if we center their safety, that we might come up with better answers for individuals.
Right. Some other issues that trans women face are, you know, one terrible one is the threat of sexual assault. So 1 in 2 transgender women have reported being sexually assaulted by another prisoner. And the same, nearly the same amount of people, 1 in 2, report being sexually assaulted by a staff member of the prison. And so sexual assault is a real threat and thing that transgender women have to deal with. You know, the next issue would be medical care related stuff. Imagine being on hormones for a decade and getting put in prison and pulled off the hormone. It's not just dangerous to your mental health, it's dangerous to your medical health for those things to happen. And so, you know, transgender people are not given adequate medical care. They're not given trans competent mental health care. And so that leads to a lot of things like the threat of suicide. You know, we see a lot of people suicide in prison because of the conditions that they have to live under. And for many transgender people, not being able to live in their identity is just not worth living for them. Right. That's not life.
And for folks tuning in, you know, the way to remember this is that hormones for a transgender person as a human rights, a medical rights issue is as simple as diabetes. If you think about how all of us really can appreciate how important insulin is and diabetes, having a doctor on hand and having your medication is life-saving. That's how we like to think about sort of chronic medication management, lifelong medication management as an important part of a transgender person's rights.
Yeah.
I must ask you if we can pivot just for a second, thinking about the protests that are happening right now across the United States, once again because of police violence. Help us. I'm going to ask you, and I have to admit, I do know a little bit about these issues. My partner and I are passionate cash bail supporters. I'd love to talk about, if you don't mind, I didn't prep you for this, but if you don't mind helping first-time listeners here at the Tegan and Sara Foundation understand maybe this moment and how the cash bail system is something that queer people really should be paying attention to.
So those are two like really big issues. But you know, for the cash bail system, the idea essentially is that bail is often set at rates that people cannot afford, especially poor people. And so what we see is that people are arrested, they're not charged with a crime.
Right.
Or maybe they are charged with a crime, but they're not convicted of a crime.
Right. Guilty and innocent until proven guilty.
Right. They're not convicted of a crime, and their wealthier counterparts are allowed to leave prison, leave jail, and live their lives and interact with their lawyer and get support from their community. Whereas poor people, this is especially true for Black women. We see Black women who have children that have not been convicted of crimes that have to stay in jail for years because they cannot afford the bail. So there are like lots of great efforts there's a great effort out of New York City that bails Black women out of jail. And that's like the basis of that. But this, you know, this moment, which it feels like it's not really just a moment. This is like a long ass chapter that we can't seem to get past, is that this system of violence is connected. It reaches all movements. It reaches all of us. The violence that people, you know, that people that deal with immigration issues face, their children being ripped away from them, the violence that, you know, Black people face for you know, infractions, not even misdemeanors, just by interacting with police, their life is in danger. And not just police, with white people. You know, they run a risk of being chased down and shot. And that is not, you know, as with incarceration issues, like my liberation is connected to your liberation. It is tied in with the liberation of all of my Black brothers and sisters and family. It's tied in with the liberation of people that are in our country without, you know, quote unquote documentation.
Right.
That our liberation is connected.
Right.
And that if we're not working on these things, I can never achieve liberation for incarcerated people if I cannot, you know, address and recognize what the impact is, or how, like, we're fighting the same violence, really.
Right. I love the opportunity we have here in June, which celebrates riots, right? Queer and trans people rioting for our own rights and liberation against the police. And we celebrate that. And so it's an opportunity for us as queer people, LGBTQ people, to dive into who's protesting right now and how can we use our 50 years of liberation since our original moments, going back to Compton, of course. How can we think about supporting the protesters right now? And it would behoove us at the moment to just really remind everybody that finding a local cash bail organization that is taking donations and is using that to directly get people, Black people and protesters at the moment out of jails is wonderful, out of while they await trial. Sorry, I got serious there for a second. I want to ask you to keep talking, and I'm going to go to our questions. We have an exciting audience here, Biff. Biff, the people want to know. The people have so many questions. People are really saying exciting things. Excuse me as I get very close to the camera now. And it gets awkward for just a second. Great, we've got a question coming in. And so give us some examples of what you're hearing coming in on this crisis hotline. What does a phone call actually sound like?
Yep. So I actually compile a report every 2 weeks about what I'm hearing. I don't share it publicly for a lot of reasons, but the first thing is that folks are afraid to report COVID symptoms because they're put in solitary confinement if they do.
Oh, wow.
So,
wait, say that again. So people, we know that we can all do the math about what's going on with COVID inside of prison. So people are not even reporting their symptoms because if they express those to someone in charge, they get put in solitary.
Yep. They're put in solitary. You know, solitary is torture. It is not an appropriate use for punishment, never mind for medical isolation. And so the prisons don't know what to do. They don't want to be bothered with it. They don't have the money. There's no public will. They just put people in solitary. And as a result, folks are not reporting that they have symptoms. And that is just, with that issue alone, if it's not fixed, this problem will not be fixed. Like, we're just going to continue to see outbreaks. So that's kind of the first one. The second one is prisoners are not given PPE or protective gear. Like, we have prisons in Oregon that not every person has the opportunity to have access to that.
So I'm wearing a mask like I do every day.
Right. Like, we're told as citizens of the U.S. that when we go out, we need to put on a mask. When we're engaging with people, we need to have a mask. Well, that's apparently does not apply to incarcerated people.
Yeah.
And the next issue, I think, is probably the most obvious issue, but social distancing is impossible in prison, especially in dorm prisons where, like, you're sleeping, there's somebody 3 feet above you, and there are people 3 feet in all directions from you.
No, I barely want to break the 6 feet rule with my partner, and we're fluid bonded. Sorry, it was a fluid bonded joke. I showed my age there. Okay. What else? Tell me what else is happening.
So there are huge issues with cleaning and sanitation. Obviously, like, we're talking, there's sometimes 80 to 100 people using 3 toilets and 2 sinks. And because the last major issue that we're trying to deal with right now is that because there are no visitors allowed, the phones are in high demand. And and people can't even meet with their lawyer. They have to do it over the phone. And so people are using the phones back to back to back all day long, and they're not being sanitized. Yeah, this is something we're putting against our faces. Like this is, you know, putting against our faces, and they're not being sanitized.
Yeah.
And if people want to have access or to the outside world, to any systems of support they have got to pick up a phone.
Yeah. So for people who haven't thought about prisons before this video, this might be the first time a lot of people are thinking about prisons. Tell me in you know, the most foundational way, why in America should our prison system be different, better? We could talk about abolitionists, you know, abolishment, but tomorrow, what would it look like in this basic way, these human rights violations?
Oh God. I mean, I think the overarching issue is that we have to reframe what criminal justice is. And we don't even need, I think, to get into this like social justice woo-woo stuff. It is statistically better for all of us if we truly help people, you know, find accountability, help people find healing, and that includes quote unquote perpetrators. It includes people who are convicted of crimes. That like it is better for us if we put them in a situation where they do come back to society, and they don't need to engage in whatever that is. You know, they don't need to harm people because we helped them heal. Right. So regardless of what you think, you know, even if this is, a lot of people feel like it's about justice, like you did this, you should get punished, but that's not justice. You know, justice is at the end of this process, we have a safer and better world than we did at the beginning, and that's never true. Yeah. People are ruined in prison. They're not healed or rehabilitated.
Yeah, give us an example. What's a hopeful moment, a positive, bright spot, a small win that you've experienced recently that we might be inspired by?
So when we first started doing our groups inside of prisons, you know, I think we went in with the attitude that many people do. It's not an incorrect attitude, but it goes like this. Incarcerated people, they're strong and they're courageous. And they, you know, they've just dealt with so much, and wow, like, you know, wow, I really want to support them. That is all correct. That's not incorrect. But when I had to be the first person to lead the group for trans women while we looked for a trans woman to facilitate, and got her approved by the prison. That was the hurdle. And, you know, so I quickly realized that like that attitude is incomplete. That like, I'm actually going in and bearing witness to leaders and work that's already being done. Like these people, they know what to do. They know the system inside and out. They have to be at the center. They have to be the leaders of this movement. And, you know, we look back in history at figures like Harvey Milk. We look at figures like Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson. And like, I'm telling you right now, there is a Marsha P. Johnson in prison right now. And what are we doing to engage or connect with or support that person? Right. And that's like the learning that happened for me really quickly. That was like, oh my God, I get to be partner with somebody like Harvey Milk, because I'm engaging with them constantly. And what an honor that is. And it really shined light for me on, you know, what is in all of this, like what is our duty? And the duty is to hand power over to the people that are most affected. And that's true of every social justice movement. And especially true of people in prison, because we've robbed them, not just of freedom, but of power. And so recently, I think that's my learning point.
That's that was great to hear. I needed to hear that. Thank you, Biff. So I don't want to take too much of your time because you're doing such important work, but here you are, like all of us, doing under extreme circumstances of just the buzz of trauma of a pandemic in our ears while we're continuing to do work, right? how are you managing? Tell us, a lot of people who are watching either right now or will watch this later are donors to the Tegan and Sara Foundation. So we are lucky to be a foundation supported by two beautiful artists named Sara and Tegan, who are generous enough to be able to share so much of their profits from their artwork with us. But we are also really made up of a lot of small gifts. So we have a lot of $25 a year donors, things like that. Help our donors understand what it is for someone like you to do this work. So they're making a gift. A lot of them don't do this kind of work during the day. How are you surviving? How do you as a person, Biff, you have a family, you're very famous for having children. Tell us, how are you getting through this? I'm just looking for some advice. I'm struggling on a daily basis. How are you working and living during this time?
By piecing it together, I think is the short answer. But I'm struggling too. Like it's hard for me too. I have 3 kids. They're all at home. One of them is sleeping in a room just down the hall right now. I've been crossing my fingers hoping that he will not wake up during this call. But in some ways, I think that we are getting, some of us that are definitely more privileged are getting a taste of what people living in poverty are doing all of the time, pandemic or not.
Yes.
That they don't have access to childcare, that they have, both parents have to work, that kids have to help take care of kids. And that is the reality of the world that we live in. And we're only just seeing a glimpse of it for a lot of us, because of the pandemic. And I was actually raised super poor. So that isn't anything that was total news to me, but it's a harsh reminder that the reason we're in this situation is because we don't have a government that works for us.
Right.
And so for me, I try to just count all of the good things in my life. Mm-hmm. That I was able to go to the dentist yesterday. People don't have that. I have a loving partner. People don't have that. I am able to work remotely. Mm-hmm. Most people don't have that. And so for me, to keep it moving is just to be you know what? This could be so much worse for me. Yeah. And it just also inspires my duty to try to make that better for other people.
Right.
To try to give people what I have.
Yeah. Reflecting on, I love this. So it's really reflecting on some of for some of us might be the first time we're experiencing some of these hardships, and reflecting on the dehumanizing or the difficulty or the overwhelmingness of some of those difficulties, challenges, and that not wishing this on anyone. And can we create a world in which we are just better taken of in all these ways, thinking about childcare, food preparation, right? Healthcare workers, a group that we care passionately about. And then, of course, you've reminded us to think about gratitude in all the little ways. And I think that that's a powerful reminder. And you have
real quick, because I know you have a lot of donors watching, and thank you. But I think that the way that we've approached philanthropy or tried to approach donors, or the way that I do it personally with my friends, people in my life, is that if we believe in this, all of us should be giving enough so that it hurts a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so for some people, that's $10. For some people, $10 is a sacrifice. For some of us, it's $300, and for some of us, it's $5,000. Mm-hmm. But if we believe in this movement, guess what? The thing that drives the movement is resources, and to get those resources, we need money. And for an organization like mine, $25 is impactful. It does make a difference. I notice that donation when it comes in. I feel grateful. And for foundations like yours, it's the same. When we see those come in, it's so important. Even just $10. I have a friend who was really struggling that donated $10 to a campaign I did once that just made me cry, because to know that they're willing to put that forward and do that is just so important. It is one way we can all help to the point that we're able.
Biff, tell people how to learn more about you and how to make donations directly to you.
Yeah, so you can go to our website, which is beyondthesewallslgbt.org. And then you can find us on Facebook, and you're watching me now on Instagram, so you can find our Instagram that way. And we talk a lot about the work we do, and there's donation links, donation link on our website.
And you're fiscally sponsored, I think I saw, by the wonderful Q Center there in Portland. Is that true?
Yes, the Q Center is the sort of gay lesbian center of Portland.
Yeah, it's great. That's really wonderful. And so we really want to urge folks this was our chance to just, we haven't had a lot of money to give yet, but we wanted to use this funding and these community grants as a way to bubble up some folks that our audience might not have had the chance to learn about yet. And so we want everyone to be able to learn more about you, to think about the prison system in the U.S., how to support prisoners, and how to support people like you who are taking the phone calls every day. That I appreciate it. And I'm really thankful for you, Biff, for joining me. And I just really want to thank you for being a human being on this planet who has chosen to spend your waking hours doing this work. I really want to thank you.
Thank you. We love you guys so much. We're excited to do the work that we're doing. So thank you.
Great. Well, I'll let you get back to your kids and all this great work, and know that we are sending a lot of love your way.
Thanks.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.